My name's Craig Hydrick. I'm the Chief Executive for the Concrete Pumping Association. Welcome to this online webinar, Benchmarking Your Business, and an introduction to what is really a new initiative for the Concrete Pumping Association, something that the board of the association is really excited about, something that's been going on in the US for some time, and we've looked to our bigger brother or sister, gender neutral, about what we can learn from benchmarking exercises. So today we have with us Stuart Donaldson with Profit Suit. Stuart gave a series of Toolbox talks during the recent Expo that we had in Sydney, and we had over 740 odd people attending the one-day event, but we saw it as an opportunity to follow that up with a series of webinars. So this is the first, and if there is interest for further ones, we may do more, but we'll be recording today's discussion, so we'll also be able to post that and make that available through our website. I don't think I'm going to go through Stuart's long resume.
No.
He's been in the banking industry more years than he cares to remember, but Stuart has a pretty good depth of knowledge in this space, so I'm going to hand over to Stuart, and thank you, Stuart, and we'll take us through it.
Yeah, thanks very much, Craig, and welcome everyone. It's great to be able to follow up with this webinar this afternoon. I did have the privilege of doing some Toolbox talks at the Expo, and it was fantastic to see people there and to be able to share the story of what benchmarking is all about. So my goal this afternoon is basically to do the same with you people here. The webinar does allow you to ask questions. I think you type them in and we can answer them either as we go or at the end. So if you need any help or you have anything in your mind, please just shout out and let us know. First of all, acknowledgement to CPAA to engage with us and actually run the first ever benchmarking study program for concrete pumpers in this country is an outstanding initiative. And Craig is right. Whilst it's very new to the Australian industry, it's not so new in the US, where the American Concrete Pumping Association has been running benchmarking programs for their members for the last several years. And I think online is a testimonial from one of the pumping companies over there, and where they talk straight to us about just the benefits that they get from that. So let's just move on. Benchmarking your business is basically about financials. It's about your financial statements, your profit and loss, your balance sheet. And what I find with most business owners is when it comes to financials, we sort of get them produced every year. Why do we do that? Because we have to. Why do we have to? Because we are required from a compliance point of view, with our taxation, or whether it's to support a loan application through the bank for some of the capital equipment, whatever the case might be. But rarely do we look at our financial statements as a powerful tool for forward planning to help us make a whole lot more money. And the reason we don't look at it, and I accept and concede that I'm generalising, is you've got to know where to look. And they are particularly complicated and complex. But I like to look at financials as your scorecard. I think they are packed full of rich information. And the whole point of the benchmarking exercise is to not only share with you in a very simple way where you should be looking, but importantly, how you're going against your competition. If I can just move the slide, just bear with me. There you go. So basically what we're talking about is measuring performance. And your financial statements are the starting point for that. But as I said before, they're chock full of information. It's complex. There's thousands of transactions go through them. So you've got to know where to look. Yet when we put this in a sporting context, and I've just got an example up there of ratios that are used to measure cricketing statistics, and frankly, you could choose any sport you like. The vested interest, the people that are involved in the sport, whether that's the fans, the coaches, the media, whatever the case might be, the reality is they can look at a sport or a sports person and they can identify what are the 2 or 3 things that we need to measure to get the real read on performance and how that athlete is going. And in this case, obviously, it's batting averages with cricket for batsmen and bowling averages otherwise. But my point is, of all the things that go on in the life of an athlete, it can be boiled down to 2 or 3 key statistics. And I like to think it's the same in business. In the game of business, it's all about performance. But what are the ratios? What can we look at? What is a good number? What's a not so good number? And if you think of your own financial statements, you know, whether it's a gross profit or a net profit margin or whatever the case might be, what is your yardstick? Who are you measuring it against? And the benchmarking study that we're talking about today is about being able to give you that yardstick and to be able to show you how you're performing against your industry peers. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. In business, I like to think that nothing in business happens until you make a sale. But once you make that sale, that dollar of revenue has to drop somewhere. And it drives its way through your business and ultimately falls out in the form of profit or cash or financial strength. But what we're focused on are all 4 of those things. And so what we want to do is we want to look at sales and we want to know how productively every business out there is driving every dollar of sales. And, you know, we do that by measuring by a series of productivity ratios, which I'll talk about in a moment. We look at the profit margins, we look at your cash flow and your financial strength, and ultimately all of those 4 key components drive the value in your business. Now, having said that, where do we get the numbers? Well, it's relatively straightforward. On the left of your screen, as you look at it, is your profit and loss statement. On the right-hand side is the balance sheet. And we can, from those statements, extract key ratios that represent the financial indicators of your business, and then we can assess that, provide you with an assessment of how you're travelling, as well as how you're travelling against your peer group, broken into different business sizes and tiers of, you know, top 25%, the middle rump and the bottom 25%. So benchmarking is basically a point of reference from which to measure. It gives us comparisons to give us perspective. And, you know, in this country, benchmarking against industries, against your peers, is a whole lot less common than it is in the US. And I used a moment ago ACPA as a very, very good example of benchmarking in action in the US. In Australia, though, we're a little bit constrained, because unless you have a proactive industry association, it isn't easy to access that data. And you really have to therefore look at your past performance. And that's not a bad thing to do. How did I travel 2 years ago, last year? What were my best years? And start to set those as your goals for your targets moving forward. Or you can do it through your own budgeting, your financial forecasting, and setting goals. If, however, you do have a proactive industry association who can engage with a benchmarking company, who can run a program that simply allows us to pull the data, and in this case, where you can participate at no cost, then that data can be collated and cut and diced in such a way that we can send it back to the recipient so that they know how they're travelling in each of these financial indicators. Just have a quick drink of water. And what you will get with the financial benchmarking study is it's a study that breaks it down to all participating companies, and you can measure it against the top 25%, and you can measure your performance against like with like in turnover categories. So if you're in the 10 mil plus category, you can look at that. If you're 2 million or less, you can have a look at that. The point is, you have a point of reference against your peers to see what their results are relative to your own. There is a very comprehensive guide to benchmarking as a second component of the project, and that will include, for example, an industry study. It's a rich and powerful document. It has some mind maps and brainstorming, and it's basically a guide to benchmarking. So it helps you and your team as you sort of sit down and get your head out of the rear vision mirror, which, as you know, financial statements typically are past tense. And when you start looking forward, you can brainstorm and you can start to think about, how do I get that gross profit margin up, or how do I improve the debtor collections so that I've got greater cash flow, et cetera, et cetera. We have samples of these available that we can make available to you. So Emma, if you, or for the people listening, if you would like an example of a sample benchmarking study, then perhaps just get in touch with the association and we can certainly make that happen for you. And then the third component is the confidential assessment, which is your assessment, how you're going and how you compare against each of the your competitors. So 3 key areas: financial benchmarking study, which is also has an executive summary that shares with you exactly how things are going, and that's also a state of industry report. The guide, which you can follow through in your own time and with your team, and very, very importantly, your own confidential assessment. Now, I just want to dwell on that word confidential because, and Craig and Emma are sitting here with me and they'd be well aware of this, it doesn't really matter what industry you're in, and certainly in the pumping industry, it's exactly the same. People are sensitive to confidentiality. And I cannot reinforce the point strongly enough that all information is completely and utterly confidential. We don't share your data with anyone, and we produce a report so that you can review your data against those categories as they're set out. And the company that actually puts or the company that has been engaged to conduct the study is Profit Soup. It's run by a lady by the name of Barbara Nuss. Now, Barbara is Seattle-based in the US. She is a regular in terms of pulling the benchmarking studies together for the American Concrete Pumping Association, and she works across multiple industries, so the likes of jewelry and retail and pharmacy and construction and hotel and you name it, she's probably covered it, and is probably the preeminent, I would suspect, arguably the preeminent benchmarking company in the US, who also has great experience in conducting benchmarking studies in Australia with companies such as Quick Copy. Barbara is online, listening in at the moment, and I'm sure she would endorse, if she had a voice, but given it's a webinar, she doesn't, but she would endorse my comments in relation to confidentiality. So hang in there, folks. I just have a little bit more to go through, but I'd like to give you a taste of just what does it mean. And the question I threw up at the Expo to give some examples of how this might well look is, let's say we ask the question of your financials, are you earning as much as you should? So this is a simple example, and let me just push that to one side. And we've got the sample benchmark of all companies who have owner's discretionary profit of 9%. And we can compare that against the top 25% in the industry. And then in page 2 of your report, you'll see in the example we're using here, the sample company, which is based on fact, that's all right, you'll see that the owner's discretionary profit is in fact 4%. So immediately you can start to say, well, hang on, 4% is pretty good. I made $200,000 last year. Yeah, but other companies in the $4 to $10 million range were making 7%, or in terms of all companies were 9%. So what does that mean? It means this: if my sales were $5 million, yes, I made $200,000. But what if I got another 5% like the rest of the industry? I could have made another $250,000. The point being, here you have a number that allows you to now start brainstorming, start looking through that, looking ahead at your business, putting it under the microscope and saying, what can we do to get us up to a level that's similar to what the industry is doing? And similarly, we could look at this in terms of direct costs and gross profit margin. The sample company has a gross profit margin of 26.8. The 4 to 10 million has 33 million, or all companies 32. Without dwelling on it, let's go straight to the numbers. If I could have improved my direct costs, if I could make my business more productive, so every dollar of sale is more productively managed, and I had sales of $5 million, if I could just be as good as the industry, again, there's another $250,000 to be made. It's really important to make the observation that whilst you might have your financial statements, which everyone does, if you don't have this point of reference, you don't know. And benchmarking studies give you this point of reference confidentially that basically is your guidance or your compass as to where you've got to go next to get a better outcome. So measurement's the catalyst. Know your yardstick, put a stake in the ground, be able to compare to others, engage your team, and see if I can make that work. Set the expectations, monitor the results, and you're in a position to reward and celebrate. I started this conversation by saying, and it's a little bit unique, I've got to tell you, that the fabulous thing about this is the Concrete Pumpers Association are offering this for free. It's really easy. There is a form that is available that just says, I'm interested. You fill it out, and that kicks off the survey, and that allows us to put a tick next to your name and saying, yes, I want in. I hope I've whet your appetite a little bit. I can be contacted, and you can get my details through CPAA if you have any questions, or you can email us. I encourage you to participate. For a good study to work well, the more in the industry, the better. I'm failing to see the downside because it is free. It is 100% confidential. It is easy, and it is going to give you very, very rich information. So happy to take questions, and I would encourage you to download the form. Emma, did you want to point out where you can do that?
You can do it on the webinar. There's a handout section, and the form can be downloaded through there, and then you can just email it through to us at info@cpassoc.com.au, or you can email it straight through to Barbara at Profit2.
Yeah.